the historical Buddha, Gautama, taught varieties of teachings. Among those teachings, there are these group of texts which is called, in Sanskrit, which is called Panchaparamita Sutra, and quite often translated in English, Wisdom Sutra. And it has several different versions, and the longest one is 100,000 verses sutra. So that group of sutra, Panchaparamita Sutra, it has two main topics. And the explicit subject is emptiness, explanation on emptiness, and the implicit, or quite often say the hidden topic, is cultivation of bodhicitta, and enhancing the bodhicitta with the 6 perfections. And that is those are the hidden or implicit topics of the Panchaparamita Sutra. And these implicit subject, the topics, are very nicely explained in this text, Ornament of Clear Realization, which is attributed to the Maitreya. And in that text, in the first chapter, when it explains, first chapter explains bodhicitta, it explained, nicely captured just in 2 simple lines. In Tibetan, Semje Pane, Shendönche, Yangda Zobe, Changjude, Yangda Zobe. So those are the 2 lines. So Semje Pane, that means, the altruistic awakened mind is, or bodhicitta is. And then that is the half of the first line, Semje Pane. Then the second half of the first line, the rest of the first line is Shendön Chir. Shenji Tön Chir, that means for the sake of, for the well-beings of others. Shen is others, Tön is well-being, or well-beings of others. Shendön Chir, that is the end of the first line. Yangda Zoba, Zobe, Yang Tagba Zobe, that means complete enlightenment or the full enlightenment. Changju, that is enlightenment. De, that means desire or yearning or the aspiration. So the bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind, is the mind which has a the desire or aspiration to work or to benefit others, and to do that, for that reason, then to have a desire or yearning to experience the full enlightenment. So in other words, there are 2 aspirations are explained. The first aspiration is aspiration or yearning to work for the sake of others, And that's the first aspiration. In Tibetan, it is called Shendön Töngyeti Dumba. Shendön means the welfare of others. Tönyer means yearning, longing. Tönyer, Shendön Tönyer. Dumba, that means aspiration. So aspiration, to work for the sake of, for the well-beings of others. That's the first aspiration. So to have the bodhicitta within ourselves, we have to train to have that aspiration, which is the first aspiration. And to fulfill the goal of this aspiration, then the second aspiration come into picture. That second aspiration is aspiration to attain or to experience the full enlightenment. So that is the really bodhicitta. The altruistic awakened mind is the result of cultivating or enhancing these two aspirations, aspiration to benefit all living beings and to fulfill the goal of that aspiration, then the aspiration to experience the full enlightenment. So that is something which is important for us to know. So this in these 4 lines, Sanje Chodang Tsogi Chongnamla, Changju Padu Dani Gyapsuchi, that is refuge, which I briefly mentioned the other day, which I will do a little bit detailed the next our gathering. And Dagi, Jinso Jive Chongnamji, 3rd line, Dagi, that means by me, Jin So, and Jimba is generosity, giving. Sok is means etc. All the virtues, all the wholesome or the merits, sometimes translated, all the wholesomes or the merits or the virtues that I have gathered by engaging in such a 6 perfection. Dollar pencher, doa, literally it means macrators or living beings, sentient beings. Dollar, doa, pencher, to benefit the living beings, dollar pencher. Sanje Tubasho, may I experience, may I attain full enlightenment. And that is the meaning of the last 2 lines. So we will say those 4 lines 3 times. First 2 lines, hold the mind taking refuge, Buddha as our teacher, or Buddhas as our teachers, Dharma as a actual real refuge that to be experienced, to be actualized, to be applied in our lives, and Sangha as a supporter, helper, and taking refuge in 3 jewels, not only when we are having tough time or difficult time, but all the time, regardless of ups and downs in our lives, which is, inevitable, going to happen. No matter how much we try, and life won't be all the time high or won't be all the time down, up, down, ups, down. We have to play with that, ups and downs. But regardless of that, holding the 3 jewels are my refuge, and then the last 2 lines, bodhicitta. So we'll say this together. Sanje Chodang Tsogi Chonama Chanju Pardo Tane Gyabso Che Dagi Jinso Jibe Chonama Ji Dola Penjere Sanje Chobara Sho. Sanje Chodang Tsogi Chonama Chanju Pardo Dane Gyabso Che Dagi Jinso Jibe Chonama Ji Dola Penje Sanje Chobara Sho. Sanje Chodang Tsogi Chonama Chanju Pardo Dane Gyabso Che Dagi Jinso Jibe Chonama Ji Dola Penje Sanje Chobara Sho. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. Now then, once again, briefly to remind ourselves the importance of, uh, you know, giving a little bit times to ourselves, to our minds, to have the qualities of stillness and the clarity. Stillness and the clarity. Stillness in the sense, our our minds are not easily be distracted by the external affairs. Have some certain degrees of stillness, regardless of what is happening outside. Uh, that is, really something important mental quality to have. Then another important quality is the clarity. Just stillness alone will not make that much different. Of course, it is useful, helpful, but without the clarity, stillness alone will not make that much, will not give that much benefit. Now, then the clarity. Here, the clarity in the sense, that our minds have the ability to aware of, fully aware of what is happening, what is going on inside, within our mental state, and outside, the outer world. Ability to really to observe, to aware of the things and events that are taking place within ourselves, around us. And that is the clarity. Here it doesn't mean clarity, when I say aware of, or, to be able to observe, not necessarily deliberately, chasing one thing after another, one thought after another, one emotion after another. No, but what is happening, in our life, around us, have this, be able to observe, be aware of that. And that awareness will give us chance to understand, the, the things and events in our lives. Although I'm not saying we are very much zombie-like state. I'm not saying that. But many of us, not very much, many of us don't pay that much attention to to our inner world as well as external world. Only when drastic things are happening, then we fully we are aware of that. But normally we just carry on, and then many of us just take for granted, just saying, okay, this is that, okay, that's how it is, then just move on to the next and next and next. We don't pay that much. So this awareness or this clarity is very important. So that, some of the Tibetan teachers, give us this nice analogy. Analogy is, when we try to change the shape of the old bamboos, old sticks. As soon as we start to bend, it will break. But when we have a very fresh new shoes, then there is the ability to make it round whatever shape that we, without breaking it. And similar to that, when our general states of mind has these two mental qualities, stillness and the clarity, then on the basis of that kind of platform, that kind of basic mental states, then if we want to enhance love, compassion, altruism, wisdom, other will grow quite, relatively ease. And that is why these great Indian, not just Buddhist teachers, many other non-Buddhist ancient Indian masters had talked about cultivation of shamatha, karma biting. That is the main reason to have really that kind of basic states of mind is calm and clear, then other mental state will work quite well on that basis. So try, all our best to give ourselves 7-8 minutes in a regular basis to use whatever technique. There are many different techniques these days, just simply to stay to the present, right here and now, and fully aware of that. So that is again, more or less repeated what I said in our two gatherings, but we Tibetans love repeating things again and again. I know, the Westerners don't like that much repetition and the lists, as I mentioned before. But repeating has a really, one positive result. That is, gradually that will sink into our psyche. Here again and again and again and again, then eventually, go down to the, in our bone. So that is really something useful. Okay, now we are going to look at the actual text that we are reading, and we have covered, the art of finished the background of the text, and we started the actual body of the text, which is the out of the 4 round, the first round, which is explaining the out of the 3 round, the first round, which is Buddha explained each noble truth, introduce each noble truth. Noble truth of suffering is this and this and this, and noble truth of origins of suffering, dukkha, is this and this. So we are in that section, and we finished the first noble truth. Then we briefly touch on the second noble truth, which is the paragraph in the page, the first page, the last paragraph, which is saying, now this bhikshu is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving which leads to. So I read this and I gave brief interpretation on this. I want to add it on a little bit on this. Now here, what in this translation, I think mainly translated from Pali text into English, and there are even within the Pali text, translated English translation from Pali to English, and there are a few little bit difference here and there. In this text, there are 4 cravings. 4 cravings are listed, as we can see. Saying that the craving which leads to renew existence, and then the next craving is craving for sensual pleasures, and the third craving for existence, and the fourth one is craving for exterminations. So there are 4 cravings are explained. Craving, or the clinging. There are different desire. There are different terms are used. But before I talk on this, I just want to make one short quotation from a great Nanda master. Dhammakirti. I think around 7th century logician and the epistemologist, Dhammakirti. And one of his beautiful, amazing texts called, the Pramana, is Pramana Bhattika in Tibetan, in Sanskrit, and in English translated saying a valid cognition. So anyway, in that text, there's in the 2nd chapter, there are 2 lines, and the 2 lines are explain relation to this one, just we have read, and it says this: Mishe sibe gyuyang majur seba misheba. Misheba in Tibetan, literally it means not knowing. In other words, ignorance. Mishe. Misheba, that sibe gyuyang. So siba is samsara, or unenlightened existence. Siba in Sanskrit, samsara, or quite often it is translated as cyclic existence, unenlightened existence. Unfortunately, where we are at this moment, that unenlightened existence. Gyuyang. So even although ignorance is the cause of unenlightened existence, Gyuyang, majur, that means have not said, or have not expressed, majur, seba nisheba. Seba here, craving, seba, nisheba, only, the only cravings are explained. So the meaning is this: though ignorance is the root of samsara, or root of cyclic existence, nevertheless, it is not mentioned. Only what is mentioned, it is only mentioned the craving. Craving is mentioned. And that is very nicely put it, summary in here, which I thought it is good to you people to explore this point. In here, in this text, when Buddha identified what is the origin of suffering, what is the origins of dukkha, he only explained 4 different cravings. He didn't say ignorance. He said only those 4 cravings. That is something, in the Bodhisattva and the teachings, or in what you call if I use that term, Mahayana teachings, some of those like Nagarjuna and those great Nalanda masters. Then what you will see, ignorance is the root of suffering. Though craving is mentioned, aversion is mentioned, causes of suffering, but ignorance is really singled out in those Nalanda masters' interpretation. But also, if you look at the little bit what's called detail, or the detailed explanation or detailed teachings given by Buddha on the 4 Noble Truths, that is, extension version is the teaching that Buddha gave on the 12 links of dependent origination. The 12 links of dependent origination is the longer version of the 4 Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths. Although we don't see in the 12 links of dependent origination, we don't see the, the third noble truth and the fourth noble truth, but these are explained in a explicit or in a reverse order. So if you look at the 12 links of dependent origination, in Tibetan, what we call the Lukjung, that means, the forward order. Forward order means first link, second link, third link, fourth link, it goes like that. That's the forward order. But the reverse order from the 12th, if the 12th stop, in order to stop the 12th, you have to stop the 11th, you have to stop the 10th, and that is the reverse order. So in that it is clearly mentioned that the ignorance is the root or the main cause of the suffering. So there are, this, I'm sure you know this, but I just want to remind ourselves, though in the sutra in here, ignorance is not mentioned when the second noble truth is introduced to the 5 disciples. Nevertheless, in his other teachings, longer version of the teachings from the Four Noble Truths, Buddha explained ignorance is the root. And because of that, many of those great Nalanda masters have mentioned this ignorance is root. And also you will come across, in the Abhidhamma text, some of those great Theravadan masters explanation. You will hear, the ignorance is the root of suffering. But in the sutra, it is not mentioned. It is not mentioned. And in the Theravadan tradition, there is a emphasis on to deal with the craving, to deal with the attachment. There is a good reason for that. There's a very good reason for that. Craving is like the, what you call the glue, like the joining, if you want to join two things, the craving is the glue. This is what here, it is nicely explained in here. If you look at the last two cravings, craving for existence, craving for existence. What does that mean? That means, we all, there are some situations, sometimes people, due to their background, due to their situation, they want to, end their life. But generally speaking, we all want to live as long as possible. I know a beautiful family in UK, and last maybe 10 years, I haven't got that much contact with them. I don't know, but anyway, three ladies, mother, 2 daughters. When I first met them, the mother might be in her late 80s, and the elder daughter, she is, I think, 60, and the younger ones, but they live in under one roof. And how they run the family, and it was very, very fascinating to see that over the years. When I first met them, the mother was able to make at least 1 meal a day, either lunch or evening, little bit some kind of soup. Then, of course, over the years, then she's getting older and older and older, and then my last sort of visiting to their family place, she was able to make afternoon tea, and to bring little bit cookie and things on. If the weather is good, they have a nice garden to the garden. And she lived, I think, age until 106 or 7. So that, I was very, very curious because I never met that kind of people that in that age, same time have a very good, clear mind. And I really want to know, you know, does she still has the, have the yearning to live, though her body is slowly giving in, and getting frail and dependent on a little bit more to her daughters. And quite often I had a conversation, and she constantly say, "Yeah, I love my life," and talk a lot in the past, nostalgic, but thinking about the future, and so on and so forth. And that was really, to me, this craving for existence. That means a continuation, day by day by day. But there are also another interesting point which I've learned living in the West and meeting these relatively old age and not have any spiritual belief. This is the only life. And in that level, people really have said, I met several saying, yeah, I have a really good time, though during the First War, Second War was tough, difficult, but I had a really good life. Now my body is not strong enough. I'm happy to go. I'm happy to leave. And that is for me, okay, this craving for existence is not necessarily very obvious there in the forefront. So that is here. But according to the Buddhist teachings, this craving for existence is within ourselves. So our life to tick, 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 biologically. But that biological ticking, is also from the Buddhist point of view, it is sustained, or it is hold by the psychological, that desire or craving for existence in a very, very subtle level. I'm not saying every moment we think, oh, I want to live, I want to live. I'm not saying that, but in this very subconscious level, very, and that is something very, very, and that is the glue to really, what you call the, move one, the moment to moment to the moment to the moment. And it's quite often, when we meet people who are terminally ill, as soon as mentally they give up, saying, now I can't, I had enough, it is painful, very often they go. I'm not saying all the time, but very often. So there are these kind of things which, is craving. And this another one. And also it is also, the what you call the craving, from this life, from the Buddhist point of view, from this life to next life. The main joining elements, main sort of to join, to connect from this life to next life, is this craving for existence. Sipa, sepa, sise. So sipa, so this existence is talking about sipa. So in other words, to want to continue, even though this life is, moving away, but like to continue. That is what here, craving for existence, craving for, the extermination in the sense, as I mentioned, some, when we lose all our hope to continue, then want to move on, not want to hold it, move on to the next. or certain extents, for example, I want to tell you a nice story, which my mother, late mother, she was illiterate. She was able to read Tibetan a little bit, but not really that well. That even learned much later. But it's a very, very experienced lady, and many of her, what you call the, many of her short expressions are very, very good, powerful, simple yet very powerful message. And quite often when I was with her, quite often she will say, in the first in Tibetan, "Yuena, yube dunge." If you have something, you have a suffering of having that. If you don't have, also you have a suffering of not having it. And I feel that's really, really, really true. Just looking at my own life experience. When I was here, young boy, studying, and the living standards are not that great. Food, everything is very, very basic, so on and so forth. There are sufferings because of not having, good qualities of the food. But then moving to the West and gradually learning to eat Western food, particularly I love French cheese. Those blue cheese, those beautiful, very, very delicious cheese. So because of that then, I did my weekly shopping by myself most of the time. I don't ask people to go my shopping, although they will go if I ask, but I don't. I do myself. So I end up very often in that alley where the cheese are stuffed, and there's so many choice. So even buying small pieces in a different, and I end up quite big quantity of cheese. So eating cheese then have a problem of putting weight. So that is problem. So my mother's, so that is here. That's here. This craving. Craving, if you have, there is a craving. If you don't have, there is a craving. And craving to get rid of what we have. This yearning, desire to thinking, oh, I wish these are not here. Those are the, things that keep our life extremely busy, and therefore, like the machine, churns and then brings the first noble truth of dukkha, suffering, And so these are really something important to look at. Okay, now we should move on, otherwise we're not going to end this. Now, then I'm going to read now the third noble truth, where Buddha introduced the third noble truth, and that is the what you call the paragraph saying, now this bhikshu is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the reminderless fading away and the cessation of sane craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. So this is the third noble truth. Buddha introduced the third noble truth. And noble truth of cessation. Noble truth of cessation. So now, first, cessation in Tibetan, Gokden. So I already mentioned den, demba, truth, the meaning of truth. What does it mean, cessation in a third noble truth of cessation? why they are called truth, which I mentioned the other day. Now the cessation. Cessation of what? That's what we need to understand. And where it is going to take place. And the cessation of what? Cessation of the first noble truth and the second noble truth, or the cessation of suffering and cessation of origins of suffering. So cessation or extinction of these two, extinction of suffering and the origins of suffering, and that is what here we are talking about, third noble truth. So where it is going to take place, that cessation, that extinction of the suffering and the origins of suffering, where it will take place. It will take place within our mental state, within our mental continuum, which is the phrase quite often used. Within our mental continuum, the cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering will take place. And this one is very nicely captured in one of the great Indian master called Aryadev. I think Aryadev. One of his texts is called 400 verses. Aryadev's 400 verses. I think that is Aryadev's. I'm not good at remembering the people's name and so forth. So anyway, in that, there's a very nice, I think today I'll just say the first two lines. Ledang nyumong sebe tar. So ledang nyumong, le means action, or quite often in Sanskrit, it is karma. In other words, our activities of our body, speech, and mind. Not all the activities, but the activities of our body, speech, and mind, which are motivated, which are led by ignorance. So le, that is the first one. Le. Nyunmong is quite often translated in English affliction, or another word is another translation is delusion or obscurations. There are many translations in English. In Tibetan, Nyunmong. So in this first line, these two are identified as the cause, as the causes of samsara, as the causes of unenlightened existence. So there are two, le, which is the karma, action, nyunmong, which is the affliction. Ledang nyunmong seba. Seba literally it means extinguish, finish, stop. Ledang nyumong sebe tar. Tar means that is the liberation. When the affliction and karma are extinguished, what is extinguished? That is liberation. That is cessation. Liberation, cessation, we can put in the same basket as more or less as the synonymous. Cessation, liberation, the moksha, there are several Sanskrit terms. Then the next line, Is that important here? Maybe not. Maybe not. I'll move that. Otherwise, no, I will not go the second line. But the first line is important in here. The extinction, or the cessation of what you call cessation of action and affliction is the liberation. So in other words, within ourselves, those actions, those activities led by ignorance and the afflictions are stopped, extinguished within our mental state. That is liberation, and that is the cessation. That is cessation, that is liberation. So now, so quite often we have, particularly in Tibetan or Mahayana or Vajrayana Buddhist tradition, there are these practices to go to Pure Land, to be born in Pure Land. I'm sure, there are Pure Lands that we can visit, but not as a holiday resort, not in that kind of external, not in that way, but a certain sort of, called Pure Land. But the actual Pure Land is within ourselves. Actual Pure Land will take place within ourselves. Within ourselves, within our mental continuum, when these two are stopped, karma and afflictions are stopped. Or another way, when within ourselves, when the second, first and second noble truth, sufferings and origins of sufferings are stopped. That is Pure Land. That is Pure Land. If we really want to be born in Pure Land, we should act in that way, to act to stop the suffering and the origins of suffering. This will be the actual, sometimes I make joking, with a little bit tease, saying that is the Pure Land and the map or the road map to go to Pure Land. Okay, so that is here, third noble truth. Here, when it says, remainderless fading away, it is talking about, the different stages of cessation that we will experience, different layers, different stages. For example, people who suffer with losing temper very frequently, and when they go to see the modern psychotherapies or those things, including I've said this many times, but I'll say this again. Which one of my culture shock. When I first moved to London from France, that was my first exposure to the proper Western city life. Though I was, before moving to London, I was in France for nearly 3 years, but that was in a monastic community in the South France. But when I moved to London, that was my first, So I had a great opportunity and chance, talk to the people, because, after the class, sometimes going for a long walk in the park. So I had my English was very, very broken in English. but still I tried. I was able to communicate. So one of the things that I've learned, and I was quite shocked, was the therapy to deal with the anger. And one therapy is banging the pillar, beating pillar. So when you get angry, so really beat your pillar. And when I first heard that, I was really curious. Well, how that's going to work? Beating your pillar. It may cause more problem when you beat very strongly. Your pillar may burst, then full of feathers, whatever mass in your room, more problem. So, but that is the way of taking the edge of this rage instead of a person, instead of this. Later upon, that there is some reason. But anyway, what I'm talking about here is, when we go to see good therapies to deal with anger, or some like the alcoholic, those people who suffer with that. Over the times, not 100%, but a quite high percentage, people get benefits. Their anger may reduce, they may recover from the alcohol, and so on. So that is cessation. That is cessation. Not whole cessation that we are talking about here. That is the sign of cessation. In the Buddhist text, there is one particular term is used in at this part: symbolic cessation. Symbolic cessation, although it is mentioned in a very theoretical point of view, but it is mainly talking about temporary cessation of certain mental difficulties. Strong anger, strong attachment, strong aversion. When those very raw, those emotions are subsided due to certain practice, that reduction is called symbolic cessation. Why it is called symbolic? That cessation, that level of cessation had not reached to the stage not going to reverse again. There's quite often people who suffer with the alcohol, and when they see this, but then quite often we can hear, oh, he or she relapse. What the benefit then somehow. That is the sign, not real cessation of alcoholic is reached. Isn't that's called symbolic cessation? So why I'm talking about this? I'm talking about this for us. When we hear, when we listen, complete cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering might be long way for us, but it is possible. It is possible because symbolic cessation takes place even in this short lifetime, and we can see this. Now, that is really something important. When we talk about the third noble truth, what we are talking about is the first and second dukkha and the origins of dukkha, cessation of dukkha and the origins of dukkha is possible within our mental continuum. That confidence is very, very important to have. So that quite often, in the in the Buddhist literature, it is said the process, psychological process at this kind of situation is first try to understand the root of suffering, which is briefly mentioned ignorance or afflictions, to understand this, understanding of ignorance, that mistaken mental state. And that mistaken mental state can be removed, can be challenged by the wisdom. When we understand that, then we will understand cessation is possible. Quite often His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, to the people who have, what you call the good thinking, analytical, or sharp faculties, people who have sharp faculties, to those people, first introduce the third noble truth. That is cessation. Cessation is possible. What is cessation? These sharp faculty people, when they realize that cessation is possible, cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering is possible, when they realize that, then they will strive to make it happen. And His Holiness Dalai Lama says very often, for the Westerner, if you want to introduce the Four Noble Truths, first introduce the third noble truth, cessation. Then do the fourth noble truth. Then the first and the second will quite, straightforward. And that is something quite useful. And I think from the psychological point of view, that is really something, when we really convince that ourselves, can experience that complete cessation of dukkha and the origins of dukkha, then there is a great chance we will strive, we will put effort. Many of us, including myself, many of us, our yearning or our desire to experience enlightenment or liberation is very much what I usually call at the assumption level. Assumption. We assume there is an enlightenment to be experienced. We assume there is a liberation from samsara, but we are not fully convinced by ourselves. And that, what you call the not reducing that gap between assumption and the actual realization or actual understanding, then we are struggling to put effort to do that, to do the cultivation of Noble Eightfold Path, which is the next topic that we are going to do. So this, what I'm talking about is the remainder less fading away. It is talking about, when the cessation take place, even in the quite advanced level, the physical body might be the result of previous affliction and the karma, but at the mental level, it's completely free from affliction. but the physical, still it is the result of previous. So this is what saying remainder less fading away. That even that one, the previous, results of the previous karma and affliction, even these are now slowly get, fading away in the sense, removing from us. That's one of the cessation is talking about. Cessation of that same craving. So giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. So that earlier, when the second noble truth is introduced with these 4 cravings, even those 4 cravings are also, are gradually extinguished and, gradually relinquished, extinguished, stopping. And this last one is non-reliance on it. This is important. Non-reliances. Now, our current, this unenlightened continuation of unenlightened existence, continuation, day by day, week by week, decade after decade, and life after life. This a continuation of unenlightened existence is relying on those cravings, those afflictions. And here, non-reliance, or reliance on it and on that craving. And that is really beautiful, isn't it? For us individually, that our continuation as a person, as a living being, is not relying on the affliction and the karma. That will be beautiful. His Holiness Dalai Lama says very often, the moment the bodhicitta is experienced, is cultivated, within himself or herself, then the real holiday is started. I like that, the real holiday is started. So the similar to here, our existence is no more relying on karma and affliction. Then that existence will be enlightened existence. Enlightened existence. Our current existence is non-enlightened existence because this existence is relying on karma and affliction. Okay, so that is the third noble truth, which is when we study more further, more elaborate, then the third noble truth, cessation. Sometimes like in the some of the Buddhist philosophical schools, masters, they sort of look at the cessation, the third noble truth, and the emptiness are like very often exchangeable. When you say the cessation, it refers to emptiness, not emptiness of all the things, on particular sets of emptiness. So, but today we'll not go there, and so that is the third noble truth, which Buddha introduced. Now the fourth noble truth, where I'm going to read that now. This bhikshu is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is the noble eightfold path. That is right view, and we have seen those noble eightfold paths. So now here, the important words are leading to the cessation of suffering. That word leading to the cessation of suffering is important one. Sometimes in the in Tibetan called lam. Lam literally it means path. Or another one is called tekpa. Tekpa literally it means vehicle. Tekpa, lam, tekpa. So this leading, or sometimes the way, and here the leading is a really nice word. If we individually, if we really truly want to experience within ourselves the cessation, which is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering and origins of suffering, to take place within ourselves, then the noble eightfold path is the cause, or if we apply noble eightfold path, then eventually we will experience the what you call the cessation. So that is something which is important for us to think. Although prayer is powerful, prayer to attain enlightenment, prayer to attain liberation, prayer to free from suffering is powerful, helpful, useful, but the actual things that lead us to enlightenment, to liberation, is the Noble Eightfold Path. Noble Eightfold Path. And this we saw earlier in the sutra, in the first page, in the second paragraph, second or third paragraph, we saw that, and we look at in three groups: wisdom group, ethic group, concentration group. The first, in the wisdom group, there are two: right view and right intention. Yeah. So these are in the wisdom group. And then ethics group, right speech, right action, right livelihood. That's the ethics. And then the concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. So these are the Noble Eightfold Path, put in three groups, which is the group is called three trainings, Lapasum, three trainings, which are mentioned in our first day, not unique in Buddhism. Almost all the ancient Indian spiritual traditions have these three trainings. The unique comes when we start to understand right view and the right intention. When the right view and right intentions are explained, then the unique or the difference will come across, or will see the Buddhist and the non-Buddhist. I'm not saying one is correct, the other is wrong, but simply to say that what, if all are the same, all have the three trainings, yes, they all have three trainings. Whether the other traditions, have these Noble Eightfold Paths or not, I don't know. But three trainings, three shikshas are the same as in the. So what is this right view? Right view. And here that we need to understand, the theory of selflessness, anatma, and to extend that theory of emptiness, shunyata, and that these two theories, these two views, you can say view or theory, view in Tibetan, tawa, tawa. Tawa has a meaning of how to see the things and the events. How should, I'm not talking about seeing as a straight visual, but, when you say, oh yeah, I saw, that means I think, I view, that is what. So how to view, how to see the things and events, including ourselves, individual. And in that context, the Buddhist, started by Buddha himself and elaborated by the subsequent great Buddhist masters, then this, how to see, how to view the things and events. Things and events should be viewed as a anatma or selflessness. Selflessness. Things and events should be viewed as a emptiness, shunyata. And that is what here right view is talking about, which is very, very, I'm sure many of you have received lots of teachings, have studied a lot, among the Buddhist, teachers in India. After the Buddha, for more than 1,005 or 2,000 years, many great Buddhist masters to interpret it, explain, elaborated these two concepts, theories. The theory of selflessness, anatma, and theory of emptiness, shunyata. Among the Buddhist masters have a different experience, have a different understanding, on these two. And which is, what is important for us is, to understand what is the main purpose. What is the main purpose of that? Having this view. Why I should view, why I should see the things and events in the lens of selflessness, in the lens of emptiness. Why? And that is really important to get a good answer to that question. Accurate answer. So accurate here, although I don't have experience, but this experience called learned masters. The reason is ignorance is the root of samsara, root of unenlightened existence. And if ignorance is the root of unenlightened existence, then getting rid of that ignorance is this right view. Do you remember earlier I mentioned ignorance? Maybe I haven't. Ignorance doesn't mean just blank, not knowing anything. Although blank, not knowing anything is ignorance, but that is not very serious ignorance. I usually say, that my ignorance to make a delicious, carrot cake is ignorance. And due to that ignorance, while I was living in the West, although I have a nice oven to bake delicious, carrot cake, but not knowing it, that, stopped me to having delicious homemade carrot cake. But that's not very serious. I can just go to the supermarket, buy, or nice, those, cake makers, just go there and buy it. That ignorance won't cause that much problem. But my view or my perception, my belief that things and events, including my identity, Tashi, the things and events, they have some kind of core nature as they are. Here the Tashi, you know, the existence of Tashi is something in this, within this mind and body. There's something finger pointable Tashi is there. Some kind of, saying this is Tashi. That belief is serious ignorance. So that is here why, why this these two concepts or the theories are important. Important because, Buddha and the subsequent Buddhist teacher have realized, the root of our suffering is this mistaken mind, this distorted mind. Among the different layers of distorted mental state, this particular distorted mind, the distortion of believing the things and events have some kind of core or entity as what they are, as they are. But that is not true. That's what here, okay, now, time is. So then the next one, right intention. Right intention has many different ways to interpret. Today here, I will interpret right intention in the sense, the intention to understand the things and events as they are. Right intention. There are different ways to interpret. Today I will interpret that way. So that is those two are the right view and right intention. These are the first one, and first in the out of three groups, wisdom group, then right speech, right action, right livelihood. So these are the ethics. So which is very, very important part of our spiritual journey. Really important part. Although in the West, there are many theories. What is ethics? There are many different theories and still continue to debate the philosophers on ethics. But from the Buddhist point of view, ethics really started from the, from the ethics, practicing ethics, starting from, the paying attention to well-beings of others. Ethics. If there isn't any consideration of well-beings of others, it is very, very difficult to say it is ethical, it is ethics, and my action is ethical action, or my thinking is ethical, thought. Very, very difficult. In other words, from the Buddhist point of view, ethics start from considering, taking account of well-beings of others. And that is really something useful to think. Although we can talk, the Buddhist ethics, monastic ethics, Bodhisattva's ethics, tantric ethics, but these all are started from this fundamental sort of base is taking account of the well-being of others. If that is not there, no matter how advanced ethics that you talk about, Bodhisattva's ethics or Vajrayana ethics, very, very difficult to really end up in a just pure culture, ritualistic activities. And that is really something useful. So here, okay, right action, talking about, our body, speech, and mental activities. And, right in the sense, all our activities of the body, speech, and mind should take into account well-being of others. That's the base, that's the basic bottom line. Then it can, add it more and more. Right action and right, speech. This is very, very useful, blah, 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 blah. But also it is very, very dangerous. So our human, what you call the thinking and the language is very amazing to make progress, but also it is very dangerous if we don't use in the right place and the right way. So right speech, what ideal gossip. Nowadays, not at the Buddha's time, not even just 20, 30 years ago. Nowadays, our social media, social that, whatever you call it, we have although our, what you call the engine is the same engine at the Buddha's time. When Buddha was there, historical Buddha was there, he says, idle gossip is not good. But now, same engine, we have different tools. Very divisive, very, very destructive. I mean, of course, it can be used in a very positive way. But many of us use, difficult to see it used in a positive way. We use in a very, as I mentioned starting, we not paying that much attention to our way of living, how we conduct our life, and very much take for granted and just, flow the way. Oh, this is the 21st century. I'm using 21st century equipment and just carry on. Or say, oh, it comes free. If I buy this, it will come free. And not thinking about the consequences of buying it and using it and all those things. Yeah. Right livelihood, which is very, very important. Okay, so now I will leave it here. Next week, we'll talk this a little bit. I like to talk a little bit on the right livelihood, which is important one, more practical one. And then now we have talked most important part, although the text hasn't finished, less than half, but later part, the text is not that although it's beautiful, but doesn't need that much blah, blah, blah. But the first part is important one. So we have spent quite good time. So I will see you next Saturday. So now, maybe next Saturday, if you have people who have questions, you can write down questions. Then we'll have at the end, we'll have maybe 15 minutes, few questions. But today we'll end here, and we'll end with a short dedication prayer. Oh yeah. Changju semjo rembo che maje panama je juro che jeba nyamba meba yang kongne kongdu pewara jo. Oh yeah. Pare rave korve shenkamandere pendan dewa malu jungwe ne jenre sewa tenzin jazo ye shabe sede pado tengyoro je. You who uphold the subject of moral way, you serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunatha's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, Savior of my master and others, your disciples, please live long. Oh yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la. Thank
Oh,
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank
oh,
you,
yeah.
Geshe-la.
Oh yeah. So I will
Thank
see
you,
you next
Geshe-la.
time. Yeah? And have a good Easter holiday.
Thank you. Thank you for the teaching. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geshe-la. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Hope to see you all next week.